So has your summer been going other way?
Good.
Good.
Yeah. It's been quiet, which I like because a lot of people go out of town, so I don't plan anything too big.
Oh yeah,
And then
yeah. Summer is good for that.
if you want to go into the Zoom, and then I can make you a presenter real quick.
Recording in progress.
Right, there you go.
Let's see, like, okay.
Hello, and welcome to Insight's August monthly Care Partner Training, Brain Health, and Exercise. Our mission here is to provide specialized care, support, and education for individuals in all stages of memory and cognitive impairment with their partners and the community. Our vision, a community where those living with memory or cognitive impairment and their care partners can achieve the highest quality of life. We are a leader in dementia care in Northern Virginia. Insight is a nonprofit that started in 1984 that supports families on their dementia journey. We care with specialized adult care programs for people in all stages of the dementia journey. Our connection, building relationships and supporting care partners on their journey, and creativity, dementia experts sharing their knowledge and resources because of every journey with dementia is unique. Now I'd like to introduce our presenter, Dr. Ellen Clarke from Brain Evolved. She earned her PhD in human factors from George Mason University in 2012, where she led pioneering research studies on the effectiveness of cognitive training games. Upon graduation, she worked as a consultant for a variety of respected institutions, including the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency, the U.S. Naval Research Lab, and Blue Cross Blue Shield. She formed Brain Evolved in 2016 to better address the needs of our older adults in the community. Without further ado, I would like to welcome her.
Thanks. All right, hello, and thank you all for joining us here today. So today we are going to be speaking about brain health and how that relates to our ability to extend our independence. So I'm not sure. Goodness. All right. Let's see if I can get the screen to share. Other. Thanks. Good. Can we see now? Okay, great. Okay, so for a long time, we've known that in order to maintain our physical abilities, we need to keep up with our physical activity and training. And recently, we've realized that the same principles can be applied to brain health and fitness. So it's great news for us because it gives us a nice avenue and a way to improve our brain. I'm going to talk about a lot of things today, but if you take one thing away from the talk today, I hope it's that a specific type of brain training, which we call multi-domain brain training, is the ideal way to really try to extend independent years from a brain health perspective. Joy did a really great job introducing me, so I don't really need to go through this, but I just wanted to mention again that my goal in the work that I do, both with my company and academia and government, I'm always trying to make sure that better brain health is achievable for everybody. So because I love science and I'm an academic, I thought we'd start with the science. So what I've got on the screen here is a graph with cognitive ability on one axis and then age on the other. And then there is a gray shaded area, which represents where an individual may fall with it regards to their cognitive abilities at any point in their lifespan due to their genetics. So where they actually fall within this range is the product of that genetic environment interaction. The red line is the typical trajectory for an individual who's not really engaging in brain health or brain training, and also doesn't have a condition, no dementia, no stroke. But what you can see is that it's a decline. You've been in healthy aging. The most important part of the graph isn't even on here yet, but it's coming up now, which is this blue dotted line we call the threshold for independence. So as long as somebody is above the blue dotted line, they are able to remain independent. Once they fall below the line, they no longer can function independently. And so what we can see is this typical person, this red line, is hitting that threshold for independence around age 75. So Okay. All right. So, the line is the red line, which represents a typical person, is crossing that threshold at 75, which means at 75, they're no longer able to live independently. And that's really sad because there's still a lot of life to live after 75. So the question is, what can we do to kind of push out the slope and the trajectory of that line, even if we don't start until later in life? How can we add more years above that functional threshold? And the good news is I wouldn't be here if there wasn't a way. And that way is what we call multi-domain brain training. So what is multi-domain brain training, right? Key question here. So the best way to talk about what multi-domain brain training is to talk about what it is not. So when I mention brain training, the first thing that comes to a lot of people's mind is something like lumosity, right? And lumosity is a great example of a singular domain approach to brain training. So what they're doing is they're taking one type of brain training, or what we call one type of cognitive intervention, in their case, the cognitive training games, and they're using that to try to improve brain health. And that's just not as successful of an approach as the multi-domain approach, which might use cognitive training games as one type of intervention, but it's also going to bring in others that synergize well off each other and really maximize the benefit. So this is really supercharging the effects. So what do results look like in actual studies when you use multi-domain brain training? I've got two different graphs here for two different types of populations. The one on the left is a study, it's a very famous study called the Finnish finger study. And if you go to the Alzheimer's Association's website, they have a whole area dedicated to this. And so this study used older adults with no history of any kind of neurological issue, so healthy, aging older adults. And what they found is significant improvement in multiple areas that have a profound effect on somebody's ability to function in their daily life. Now, when we look on the right, this is a study that looked at older adults with a diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease. And so what they did is they split the older adults with Alzheimer's into 4 different groups. Each group got a different type of intervention, while the blue group on the line, the blue line, that group got nothing. They did nothing. The red group was provided with the medication, the best medication that was available at the time, which was donazepam or Aricept. The yellow line got the multi-domain training, and the black line got both the medication and the training. And what we see when we look at the graph is that at the start, although the dots aren't exactly on top of each other, when you run the numbers, there's actually no difference between the groups. But then when you start to look at what happens after 1 year or 2 years of doing these things, they've spread out and there is significant difference. However, there is only a significant difference between the blue group, the group that did nothing, and those groups that involved training. The red line that involved medication, that's not a statistically significant difference between the blue and the red. And so what this study shows us is not that you shouldn't take your medications, you should absolutely take your medications, but that the combination of the medications with the training can really lead to much more substantial impacts on daily life. Were there questions or anything? Okay. All right, so the next question is, now that we know this works, how does it work? And it operates through ability of the brain called neuroplasticity. And neuroplasticity is the way for the ability of the brain to kind of change and adapt over time. We used to think that this stopped at a certain age, but we now know that that's not true. And so different types of training take advantage of this opportunity that in this ability that the brain has. So a quick example, I show this picture here. Within a second, I'm sure you can see what it is, right? So the first question is, how many people see a rabbit? or saw a rabbit. So most people don't see a rabbit. Most people see a duck, right? But the truth is, it is an ambiguous figure. You can see both. And once I kind of point out how both are in there, you can kind of see both of them. And so this is really a quick example of how we can train the brain very quickly if we know how to do it. And also interestingly, with this particular ambiguous figure, almost always people say duck. We always have a couple rabbits. But the closer that I show this figure and I ask this question we are to Easter, the more people see the rabbit. We've got a nice little priming effect of the brain too. So when we're looking at neuroplasticity, and not only is there, quick examples like that ambiguous figure that I can pull, but there's also bigger examples. And so the best of these is that we know that as we go through the lifespan, we have different cognitive areas of strength and challenge. And so it's not necessarily that our cognition gets worse as we age. It's just that it's different. And of course, these are generalizations for age groups. Not everybody is the same, right? But for the child, we see they have a strength in something we call speed of processing, right? So that's their ability to kind of pick up and learn. And obviously they're processing and learning everything very, very rapidly. However, they have a challenge area and something of attention, right? If you've ever met a child, the attention span is very short. And so those are their strengths and challenges. When we look at the older adult population, what we're looking at here is a strength in something we call crystallized intelligence. And crystallized intelligence is basically a fancy word for wisdom, knowledge of the world around you and how to best interact. Where we run into difficulties, the challenge area. So for older adults, it's generally something called executive function. So this is a large cognitive process, and it involves things like strategy, multitasking, planning. Think, like you're making dinner and the phone rings. Managing both of those tasks simultaneously becomes harder as we get older. And because it's a broad process, it tends to impact daily life more than something that's smaller, like attention. And so that's why we have more difficulty sometimes as we age. It's not that the brain is worse, it's just that challenge area is different. Now, every person is unique, and so you would have to figure out what your own specific strengths and challenges are. And that's really the crucial first step to any training program, is to have some kind of assessment run and figure out where your strengths and challenge areas lie. And that's the only way you'll be able to create a training program that's really going to help you. So let's talk about a specific type of multi-domain training program and what the elements are and how they're implemented. So in this particular example of a multi-domain training program, we've got 4 different elements. These all have great support in the literature. We've got mental, which is the cognitive training game, which most people have heard of. Physical exercise is good for the brain, not just the body. And actually, as a singular domain approach, if you were only going to do one type of training and not do a multi-domain, physical exercise, as long as your doctor approves it, that's the one with the most support and the strongest impacts. The others are social, which also huge impacts, and stress relief. So when we look at this specific type of program that has these 4 elements, these are the types of results that people see with them, right? So significant improvement in multiple areas. Also pointing out that where this particular person was at the top of the measurement, 10 out of 10, they remained at 10 out of 10 start to end. So these multi-domain training programs, they don't just move resources around. It's not like you get worse at one thing to get better at something else. And so, yes, significant improvements here. So let's go through each of the elements, or each of the different types of training or interventions. The first is physical exercise, which again, like I said, if you were going to do only one type of intervention, this is the one to do. It's critical, but it's very difficult because you have to be cleared by a physician. And that can be difficult for a lot of older adults who are dealing with physical issues as well. So that's one that has to be cleared. There's also many different types of exercise. How do you know which one is going to help with your brain? How do you know which one you're going to like? Which one are you going to do? There's a lot of different elements to consider. And again, motivation, which one are you actually going to do, is a big issue with physical exercise. So what the research has actually shown is that when you combine physical exercise with mental exercise, that's the way to really maximize the benefit of the physical exercise. However, it really has to be done properly because it's very easy to overload the system when you're already doing physical exercise and you add anything on top of it. You might think it would be easy, like, oh, sure, I can do a little something while I'm running. I'm just running. Why can't I use my mind? My mind's not being used for anything. But it actually makes a huge difference and can really easily overload someone. So this has to be done very skillfully in order to see a benefit and not just overload the system. Motivation is a huge issue when it comes to exercise. A lot of people don't like exercise. Some people love it, but a lot of people don't. And so it's always good to think about different ways to help motivate yourself to continue with exercise. And so this is a little bit difficult to do as a discussion with most people online, but I'll give you some examples that we have here. So some examples we came up with is an exercise buddy. So that could be a person or an animal. There are rewards you can come up with for yourself. Competition is another great one. Setting goals, but when we say set goals, it's set small goals. You don't want to go out there and say, I'm going to run a 5K and then just go out and try to run a 5K, right? Small goals. And then eventually maybe in a couple months you run the 5K. And then just trying out different types of exercise to find the one that you like. Or maybe you're a variety person and just different exercises all the time is the best way for you. Next up is the cognitive training games. So here is again difficult because you need to make sure it's challenging the right areas. You don't want to just, look up brain game on your phone, pick the first one and go for it. You need to make sure that it is actually challenging the areas that are challenge areas for you. Also, ideally, that game is taking advantage of your strengths. Because if you're playing a game that is just focused on improving your challenge areas, it's not going to be very fun. It's going to be difficult and frustrating because nobody likes to do something that they struggle with over and over and over again. So having a little bit of something that you're good at in there helps with continuing to actually do it. Because if you're not going to do it, no use to anybody. Which again goes back to these games need to be engaging. So when I spoke earlier, I talked about how in general, older adults have a strength in the area of crystallized intelligence and the challenge area in the area of executive function. And just quick recaps here, because we're going to do a little exercise. But crystallized intelligence is our fancy word for wisdom. So an example of this is that relates to the challenge area. It's just like you're making dinner and it's a favorite of yours and you're getting out all the ingredients. And you know exactly where they are and what ratios to use. You probably don't have to look at a recipe, all those kinds of things. Challenge, executive function. So this is the strategy, planning, multitasking. And here when we're looking at dinner, it's making dinner and the phone rings. Or it can be remembering where you put the keys down, right? So you came in, you had your keys, you put it down, but your husband started talking to you when you walked in the door. The kids called, and now you can't remember where you set those keys down. So let's look at some common games that I get questions. Some of them I get questions out about all the time. Some I just think are interesting. But how good are we at spotting a good brain game? So we have crossword puzzles, Mario, bridge, and words in a word. Words in a word is something that's used pretty commonly in a lot of senior living communities. They'll have, a word in this case is pedestrian, and you have to make as many different words out of the word pedestrian as possible, and you get points and all that. So the question is, which one of these are actually make for ideal training games for somebody with strength and crystallized intelligence and a challenge and executive function? When we break them down, start with crossword puzzles. This is the question I get all the time. Is I do crossword puzzles. Is that good for my brain? And in terms of a cognitive training game, generally for older adults, not so much. It's very high on the crystallized intelligence, which is why it's a favorite. It's tapping into a strength. But in terms of executive function, it's not really there. Now, it still can be helpful for your brain health if you find it relaxing. Stress relief is one of our training areas. But in terms of a training game, not so much. Mario, again, not great. Really tapping into crystallized intelligence, how to play the game, how to play it. Not a lot of strategy in Mario. Bridge is probably our best one up here. It does have some crystallized intelligence, and it's got a mid-level of executive function. I'd like to see some more a time constraint or something, a little bit more with Bridge, a little bit faster paced, but from the ones up there, Bridge is the best one. I also love that Bridge has a social component to it. Socialization is another one of our training areas. And then word in a word, it's really not great. It's kind of like crossword puzzles. So yeah, if you had to pick one of those four, Bridge would be the one. So talking about stress relief and crossword puzzles, let's talk about stress relief. So stress can be harmful to the whole body, which includes the brain. And when we talk about the ideal types of stress relief, when we're trying to target a whole population and not just an individual, the most amount of research supports something called mindfulness. This is typically thought of breath work, body scanning, things like that. But what is stress relief for one person might not be for somebody else. Some people find the mindfulness stuff kind of grating. They just can't get behind it. So it is largely variable. And stress is it's tough because some people don't even recognize that they are stressed because it can present in very different ways and ways that we would not expect. And so some examples of somebody experiencing stress are mood swings, which you might not be aware that you're snapping at everybody. You're just trying to get the task done. But somebody else might see it. And then some people react by isolating themselves when you're very stressed out, just kind of shut down, don't want to speak to anybody. Changes in sleeping and eating, and that can go either way. All of a sudden, you notice that you're sleeping all the time, or you're constantly waking up, can't go to sleep, mind running. Eating, you might be overeating, you might be undereating. Either way, both ends of the spectrum. There's also a range of physical manifestations. A lot of people think of stress and headaches or stress and GI upset, which are common, but they're also any variety. People carry their stress, they call it carry their stress in different areas. It can be anywhere, it can be chest pains even. Sometimes stress is manifest in chest pains, maybe back pain. I've had people with back pain from stress. It just depends on the individual. And then, of course, with stress, we see issues with brain health and brain fitness. I've had multiple times people come up to me and very concerned about their brain health, but then we start talking and thinking they're on the road to dementia, maybe they have MCI, and then we start talking, and I've come to find out they have a high stress level, and just by reducing the stressors, we're able to increase the brain health substantially. Obviously, not the case for everybody, but there have been I've seen multiple of this. Now, and the last is our kind of unassuming right here, our socialization. So I used to have to talk about how important socialization was a lot, but COVID has done a lot of the talking for me. in terms of how important this is. And in science, we didn't realize it at the beginning either. So when we would test a new intervention, you'd have the test group doing the intervention, and then you'd have the control group who was allegedly doing nothing. But this nothing group would either be getting together and playing board games, or they'd be at minimum getting a call from the researcher multiple times a week, checking in on them, seeing how they're doing, checking off boxes on the study list. And that's all socializing. And so what we began to find was that there was an improvement across the board in these control groups. And so it figured out that it was socialization, and now there's ways in these intervention studies that we mitigate that. But yeah, even science wasn't aware of it in the beginning. Socialization also, we want to make sure we take advantage of technology when we can, if we can. So this is again, the points being made for COVID, right? So sometimes those opportunities to socialize in person aren't available to us, or sometimes it's just easier and technology's there. So take advantage of it. And also this is somewhere where everybody can help, where somebody that's isolating and not socializing, and trying to be that friend that brings them out. So one of the most classic examples of socialization is eating and having a meal with somebody. So that was severely impacted by the pandemic, right? So, at home, we were really isolated in our homes with our, whoever was in our house. If you were living in a community, you were often isolated within, not even within the community, but within your room, or within your house. And so definitely not really eating with other people like we usually do. So when we think about the impacts of socializing while eating, there are specific impacts for older adults that have been studied. And what they found is that if you socialize while you eat, this is particularly if you're eating with friends, with people that you like, and people that you know and are comfortable with, it's positively associated with intake and health. So you tend to eat more, and you tend to be healthier. And intake, the amount that someone consumes can be a problem as we age. And so socializing while eating helps with this. And one other thing on this, they are now testing and developing kind of VR technology for eating remotely. And it's fascinating and it's wild, because not only are you immersed in this environment, but they can also make you taste things like you're actually eating, even though you're not. It's wild. So there's cool stuff happening here. And so when we talk about socialization, it's hugely important, and it's got this really negative cycle associated with it. So when somebody first starts to notice that maybe their cognition and their brain health isn't what it used to be, a lot of times people start to withdraw because they're embarrassed or nervous or just something else. And so they'll isolate themselves. They'll be less likely to go attend that dinner. They're not going to go to that birthday party. And so they withdraw. And unfortunately, that's the worst thing you could do for your brain health, because that's just going to perpetuate that brain. And so there becomes this, negative cycle. And so we really want to try to break that cycle. So making sure that everyone realizes that it's okay to make mistakes and just get out there and be social, and we're just happy that that person's with us. So other pillars that aren't generally part of a multi-domain approach to training, because there's just difficulties in terms of applying it to everyone. Diet is a big one. And of course, there are huge variations in dietary needs by person, particularly when we look at older adults. When we talk about diet, I feel like there's a new article every other week or so about this new great nutrient, like, oh, just drink 12 cups of coffee a day and your brain's going to be great. Or like, did you know, just eat a pound of chocolate and you're great. And so every week it's something different, but none of that has substantial evidence behind it. The only thing that does is something we call the Mediterranean diet. And so it's a whole diet, it's a whole way you eat. It's not just one thing. And the Mediterranean diet isn't how we typically think of a diet. It's not caloric restriction. It's just about the portions of things we eat and what is in what portion and what ratio. So Mediterraneans, lots of plant-based foods. So when you think of the typical American plate, we have usually our largest portion is meat, and then we have small portions of our, we call them our side dishes, our grains and our veggies. And the Mediterranean diet is kind of the opposite of that. So the big portion is going to be your veggies and your grain, and then a small portion of meat. And so that's really all it is. There's also another version of the Mediterranean diet called the Mind diet. And that one is new and has promising results behind it. And it's the Mediterranean diet modified specifically for brain health. And it's just very heavy in leafy greens. The other one is sleep. So sleep, this is one that really needs to be tackled by a combination of some training and a physician. So here there could be a lot of things causing issues with sleep. If there can be an existing medical condition that you may or may not know about. It can also be medications that are used for medical conditions that you do know about. And so having your physician help you balance that out is necessary. There's also pain that can cause issues with sleep. Some multi-domain trainings can help with that, but you might need physician assistance as well. Multi-domain training can help you increase your exercise, which helps with sleep, improve your sleep habits, your stress, and your lack of socialization. All are contributors to the kind of sleep that you get. The other thing to remember if you're looking to kind of apply this multi-domain approach is that it's not piecemeal. You can't just do a little bit of this here and a little bit of that there. You really need to have an approach where you are doing these things consistently and repeatedly in order to see the kinds of results that I've been showing today. And here's another reminder of a group that went through a multi-domain training program. And this group too, the gray, those are older adults with no history of neurodegenerative disease, no stroke, no nothing. They have improvements. Yellow is somebody with a stroke history, and purple is somebody with early stage Alzheimer's. So everybody here is benefiting pretty significantly from this multi-domain approach, and they're also benefiting specifically in areas of need that they. So multi-domain training can be, some work to put together, but the results are worth it, in my opinion, at least. And in terms of time, that's another big question. How much time do you need to dedicate? Let's say you've got a program set up. How much time per day do you really need to dedicate? The example I showed today, that one and those results are with about 10, 11 minutes per day for 12 weeks or 76 minutes per week. And if you look across the board at different types of interventions, even singular domain approaches like lumosity is 10 minutes a day, 75 minutes a week. So this is the type of time that you would need to dedicate. So again, I know I talked about a lot of things, but hopefully I have really drilled home that multi-domain brain training is really a great way to try to extend those different features. And this is my contact information. If anybody has questions that aren't answered today, feel free to reach out.
Does anyone online or in person have any questions for Dr. Clarke? You were that thorough.
I guess so. Great. Okay.
Give you guys a couple more seconds to see if anyone's typing anything. I don't want to miss anyone if there's questions. Oh, there's one. Are there apps you recommend?
So it depends. If you're looking for a multi-domain approach, I don't know of an existing app that does that. If you're looking for singular domain, if you want a cognitive training game or something like that, I would recommend something like Brain HQ over Lumosity. Lumosity actually has not that great research. Brain HQ is much better. There was a study that just came out looking at Brain HQ, which is the best scientifically after brain training games, but compared that to Duolingo, which is learning a second language. And those were equivalent in the study. So those would be good options. If you're looking for multi-domain, like I said, I don't know of an app that does that. My company, we do a multi-domain program, but it is typically in senior living communities. We do have a pilot program that we're running for individuals. So if you're interested in being part of a pilot program, we'd be happy to have you. Email me or the links on our website.
Would you show the diagram of the multi-domain approach again?
Yes. All the way back here. This one?
I think that's what they wanted.
Okay.
And then how does the second language training integrate into this?
Yes. Yeah, like I said, we don't have second language training in this one that I talked about today. But there were studies that it's a brand new one that just came out, and it looked at Duolingo compared to Brain HQ, which, like I said, is kind of the gold standard in cognitive training game arena in terms of scientific accuracy. Lumosity is much more engaging. Brain HQ is much more scientifically better, but yeah, Duolingo is just as good. So you could choose to do something like that, and Duolingo is free. So yeah.
Do you have a list of games that are specifically good for executive function?
I do not have a running list, but if you're looking for a game, what you want to do is find something that's tagged with a lot of times in the app store and things like that, they have strategy games. So just look for something that's under strategy.
Brain H2, is this for Nintendo only, or did I miss something?
Brain HQ. So Brain HQ is mostly web-based. I think they have an app, but you can just go to their website and it's all, I know that you can go through their website. So it's not for Xbox or anything like that.
And then how much does your pilot program cost if we decided to do it?
We are still working out those details. So if you're interested, just send us an email or click the link on the website, and we'll get you the information that we have at the moment.
You put your email back up.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And you can call and text me too. That's it. I always forget. Some people like to call. I've never had anybody text me, but open to text message too.
I tuned in late. What are we supposed to do for 10 minutes a day that is beneficial?
Multi-domain brain training. Yeah, multiple types of cognitive health benefiting activities.
So those that came on late, we are recording this. It will be posted within the next week. You can rewatch what she had to say and look at things that you may have missed. It was a lot of information, but just for you all to know that did pop on late, we did report it.
Yeah.
I think that's the end of our questions. We would like to thank Dr. Clarke for being here today, and next month, please keep an eye out for, will be the second Wednesday, same time, same place. We'll be talking with the Frontal Temporal Lobe Dementia Association about FTD. It looks like I have one more question. Very informative, thank you.
Oh, thank you.
If you guys have any further questions, to see any of our other events that come up with Insight, please go to insightmcc.org. We have lots of great things coming up in the fall, author events, movie events, our regular trainings. So please feel free to look there. We have our support groups as well. We record all of our trainings and post them up there so you can look back at previous ones we've done as well. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. It's melissa.long@insightmcc.org, or you can always give us a call at 703-204-4664. And we can help you as well. But thank you again for coming this month, and we will see you next month with our topic on frontal temporal lobe dementia.